I'm Andrew Flushy. A lot of clients ask me what will happen if the officer doesn't show up to court when you have a traffic ticket like speeding or reckless driving or something like that. Unfortunately, as a lot of things in law, the answer depends. Generally in Virginia, the officers have 1 day per month when they're in each court. Now that rule does vary depending on the county or the court that your case is pending in, but that's kind of the average rule, is that they have a regularly scheduled court day each month in each court. So if the officer doesn't show up for his court day, usually what happens is they will call in with some kind of reason, such as they're being sick, or perhaps a death in the family, or some kind of official duties that pulled them away. Some of the state troopers sometimes get pulled away due to some kind of emergency, and the same thing happens with deputies, the local sheriff's deputies. So basically, if the case has not been continued by the Commonwealth before, and the officer has called into the court or faxed in a letter with some kind of reasonable excuse for why they aren't there, most judges that I know will continue the case to the officer's next court date. So it's not going to result in an automatic dismissal. But if the officer simply doesn't show up and doesn't call, and the court and the clerks or the court try to reach them and they can't reach them, then most judges will dismiss the case. But honestly, that is a very rare occurrence. Most of the time, the officer is present in court because they have lots of other cases that day. So they're going to be there to handle all their cases. And if they're not there for some reason, it's because they have some kind of reasonable excuse for not being there. And just like if the defendant called in to the court sick or having had car trouble and couldn't get there, the judge would usually give you a continuance. He's going to do the same courtesy to the officer if the officer has notified the court about why they're not there. Some judges won't do that though, and so it could be your lucky day. Even if the officer has fallen ill, some judges might still dismiss the case. Tied to this kind of traffic myth of if the officer doesn't show up, then the case will just be automatically dismissed, is the idea of continuing your case to try to make it more likely that the officer won't show up. But if you go back to what I said at the beginning of this video, that the officer has usually a regular court day each month in each court, if a case is continued either by the court or the officer or by the defendant, then the continuance will be to the officer's next regular court date in almost all cases. So we're not going to be able to put your case on some random day where the officer doesn't have any other cases in court, and thus he's going to have other cases and he's going to have a strong incentive to be there, not to mention the fact that his supervisor will make sure that he's there because that's his job. So in Virginia, the officer is usually in court, and if he's not in court, it's maybe because he has some kind of reasonable excuse or reason for not being there, and in those instances the case will be continued. If he doesn't show up and he doesn't call in a lot of cases that would be a dismissal, but it's not going to be a dismissal if you're not there and you don't have an attorney there. So if you don't show up and the officer doesn't show up, the judge would just continue the case. So that is at least a little incentive for you to at least come to court or hire an attorney to come to court for you.